Hi, this is Rick Gleason and Don King coming to you from the heartbeat of worker health and safety from the University of Washington. We're in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences at the University of Washington. And so today we just wanted to briefly talk a little bit about OSHA's new silica standard. And Don, I know you've been in construction forever, and currently, you're in the tunneling underground construction industry. But where have you ran into silica in your passages in construction?
Well, it's an interesting phenomenon, this silica thing. I think that in the old days, people used to think, well, if you're grinding on a piece of concrete, and then you should have on the proper protection, and that these dust particles are contained that have silica in them, so you have to have the proper mask on and filters and so forth. But the real truth of the matter is there's silica anytime you penetrate concrete of any type, whether you're drilling, whatever you're doing. We also, down there in the tunnels, we do a lot of shotcreting. So shotcrete also is made up of concrete, and it goes on best when it's dry and not so wet. So then you've got this contact again of airborne particles, and it comes and goes. So people say, well, it's not that bad today, and then the next time you come down there you can't see, so then they say, well, gee, maybe it's not that good. So it's out there all the time. I think we've done a fairly good job of awareness, but I think we can do better.
Makes sense. And we've known silica has been a hazard for many, many years. The first video I ever saw on silica was put out by the Department of Labor in 1938 called Stop Silicosis. In fact, it's on OSHA's website to this day. Also, it's on YouTube, and it's in black and white since it was 78 years ago. But they were aware of it back then, and they were talking about wetting, if you were jackhammering, talking about ventilation, talking about engineering controls 78 years ago. Then when OSHA came along in 1970, they continued on within the Department of Labor, and the first proposal of silica was in 1974. So realistically, we talk about the new OSHA code, but it's really they've been working on it since 1974, and it finally came out in April of 2016. So it's been a while, but finally there's a permissible exposure limit that's consistent, and the new PEL of OSHA is going to be set at 50 micrograms per cubic meter for all types of silica exposure amongst all industries. So it will be the same for construction, same for general industry, same for maritime. There'll be different phase-in dates and abatement dates. But interesting, even that's not the most current. The American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, which we refer to as the ACGIH, they have established a TLV for silica at half that, at 25 micrograms per cubic meter. So you may want to think about not just meeting the OSHA code, but maybe even exceeding it. And just a thought that when you sample for silica, it's about respirable silica, the smallest, finest particles that are going to get deepest in your lungs and do the greatest damage. So if an industrial hygienist comes out to do sampling, they'd want to have a little cyclone sampler that would be able to pick up the very small, fine silica dust particles that are crystalline in nature, that will get deep into your lungs and harm you if you weren't doing potential feasible engineering controls and proper work practices. So also the state OSHAs will have 6 months to adopt one at least as effective as the comparable federal rule. So we're going to see a lot go on in 2016, I think, on silica and protection of the workers. Don?
So now I understand that Washington, again being a leader, has adopted this level at 50 sometime back. Is that correct on a couple of them?
Yes, in 1989, the state of Washington adopted a more restrictive permissible exposure limit for silica than OSHA. OSHA tried to, but it was vacated by the courts. OSHA was trying to update about 300 codes at one time, and the court basically told them they had to go at each one at a time as an individual chemical and contaminant. So they kept plugging away on silica, and now they have their new rule. But Washington's there, but only in their permissible exposure limit standard. What Washington will have to adopt is the requirements for medical monitoring, engineering controls, official training of workers, and so it will be one of their expanded standards. And in the end, it will look kind of like the current asbestos or the lead or the chromium standard, which has much more requirements and training and documentation. But they're at least on the right path.
Yes. Well, it sounds to me like we need to engage the industrial hygiene community more than we have in the past, because if they've set their standard at 25 and they're the scientists that know what we're dealing with, that's really where we should be going and looking.
That's a good point. So at least we've come down. The old silica code in construction was 250 micrograms per cubic meter, and the silica code in general industry was 100 micrograms per cubic meter. So we've come way down. We're at 50 now, and maybe in the future we might be at 25 if we adopt the ACGIH TLVs. Don, I appreciate you being here today, and this has been Rick Gleason and Don King from the Heartbeat of Worker Health and Safety from the University of Washington. Don, any last thoughts for us?
Well, again, it's really important that as individuals you start thinking about yourselves and what you need to protect yourself and your family. And with that, we say to all of you wonderful listeners out there, aloha.
Shake hands with danger. Meet a guy you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety. Now they call me Three-Finger Joe. I was young and feisty, never did things by the book. Just let me get my toolbox and I'll take myself a look. I climbed up on the dozer with my mechanic's pride. Said, you can keep it running, friend, while I poke around inside. Shake hands with danger, meet a guy you ought to know. I used to laugh at safety, now they call me Three-Finger Joe. Though I learned a lesson, I forgot it soon enough. The nicks and burns and scratches showed the young ones I was tough. Till another morning, I was grinding on some steel. My other hand